There is an aspect of authority in all acts of communication, cooperation, and collective living. Anarchists are opposed to authority, so it seems odd that they would engage in such an activity. In this video, I'll be making a crucial distinction between mutual influence and illegitimate authority. This is the Anarcho-Tech. I'm not doing this merely to show that collectives are legitimate, but to lay the grounds for the complete destruction of the totality. So here we go. Illegitimate authority and mutual influence. Two things that need to be understood not only to destroy the totality, but to survive the totality. First, we need to distinguish between different forms of authority. As Erich Fromm, psychologist, points out, the word authority is pretty vague. It can refer to very different things, good or bad. Like any word, it's intrinsically valueless until applied to a specific context. An authority can be applied to various contexts. Anarchists are in favor of one form of authority and deeply opposed to another. Illegitimate authority, or hierarchical authority, is unjustified authority, irrational control, domestication, etc., all of which constitute the essence of the totality we're seeking to destroy. Anarchists are not only in favor of, but welcome, almost require, another form of authority. Rational authority, or mutual influence as I will call it, is justified authority, rational persuasion, friendly communication, or mutual influence. This is the essence of constructive relationships, something anarchists seek to liberate in themselves and in others. Illegitimate authority is precisely that, illegitimate, in that not only are there no grounds for its existence, status, or continuation, but it is a kind of sickness, a disease, that spreads. Capitalism, for instance, is this illness incarnated, as it is amongst the state and other things. Illegitimate authority is expressed in the belief that people are incapable of thinking independently, acting autonomously, or living a life free of coercion or domination. Illegitimate authority is born out of power and serves to exploit the person subject to it. This is the artificial, privileged, legal, and official influence, as Kropotkin called it. The burden of proof is something that any act of power must live up to. Power is never legitimate unless it can justify itself as such. Thus, by default, any act of power, whether violent or subtle, is illegitimate until it justifies itself. If power's existence cannot be proven, then it needs to be dismantled. This is something that Chomsky talks about in quite a few of his videos on anarchism. The non-pacifist insurgents, for instance, believe that there is a point at which power can be legitimated. There is a point at which force is necessary. So not all anarchists are pacifist. In fact, resistance itself is an implicit act of force, and pacifists have difficulty responding to that fact. However, resistance doesn't require legitimation. It is predicated on the illegitimacy of that which it resists. This sounds kind of tricky, but if you think about it, it makes sense. To be controversial, the state, for instance, and not the terrorist, must justify themselves. And I can continue this point in another video. This is important to note because a common ideology in civilized culture is that the state is implicitly justified and that resistance itself, by default, is illegitimate, the opposite of what I just said, and that for the illegitimate minority, the terrorists, for instance, to exert force, they must legitimate themselves, they must debate with others. The state's existence, on the other hand, is not open to debate. This ideology in turn perpetuates the state's existence, and this is something else I'll go into in later videos. Rational authority, or mutual influence, is born out of the idea that human beings depend on one another and thrive socially, that communication or communication, cooperation, cooperation, and coordination or coordination are all essential to a meaningful life and society. You should see my previous videos on Anarchy is Libertarian Socialism, where I explain this in more detail. But rational authority is often called mutual influence, natural influence, or rational influence, as Bakunin always called it. Rational authority can help a person think, grow, act, and actually increase a person's freedom, because the more various forms of rational influence presented, the more options a person has to choose from. To abolish such choice would have a negative effect on the person's ability to choose. Now I will attempt to further differentiate between mutual influence and illegitimate authority. According to psychologist Erich Fromm, the difference is that rational authority not only permits but also requires constant scrutiny and criticism. It is always temporary. Its acceptance depends on its performance, meaning it is open to verification, falsification, improvement, contextualization, etc. by all of those whom it affects. The source of irrational authority, according to Fromm, on the other hand, is always power over people, and power on the one side, fear on the other, are always buttresses on which irrational authority is built, meaning it is driven from illegitimate authority, social status, and is driven by the fear people have of opposing it. Thus, the former is based on equality, while the latter, by its very nature, is based on inequality. The real difference is between taking part in a decision by listening to alternative viewpoints or experts before making up your mind and having a decision made for you by a separate group of individuals, elected or not, because that is their role in society. The real difference is the difference between direct democracy and representative democracy. It's the difference between being a spectator and a participator in the decisions that affect you and others. It's the difference between being able to exercise judgment or freedom and being subject to the will of others or the will of a hierarchy. The practical difference, to make this clear, the difference between someone who is recognized as competent at a task, authority by proof, i.e. socially recognized, and someone who has authority as a social relationship based on status and power derived specifically from hierarchy. It's the difference between a friend showing you how to fix a bike and your boss giving you unnecessary and arbitrary rules. It's the difference between cooking with good friends and being a server at a restaurant. In other words, the difference is between someone who has authority from working at something and can help others by teaching, and those who derive authority from their social status or relationship. So why is this distinction between mutual influence and illegitimate authority necessary? The illegitimate authority or mutual influence difference is a crucial distinction in understanding the anarchist desire for libertarian socialism, i.e. a world free of illegitimate authority and full of mutual influence. The difference is also key in thinking through the various aspects of the totality we will be examining: capitalism, the state, corporations, private property, as well as various other things like sexism and homophobia. Illegitimate authority is the very essence of the totality we're seeking to destroy. In this destruction, we are seeking to preserve the power of mutual influence or rational authority, as that is key to constructing a genuine anarchist order. As I said at the beginning of this video, understanding this distinction is key to not only destroying the totality, but surviving that destruction.